And breaking news to bring you now, court has just wrapped in the first ever criminal trial of a former president of the United States. Yes, we're talking about Donald Trump. He was in the courtroom there in New York City all throughout the day, 6 hours, matter of fact, as attorneys began jury selection in the hush money case against him. As you know, Trump is being charged with 34 counts of falsifying documents that he hid those payments made to porn star Stormy Daniels to try and keep her quiet about an alleged affair that they had prior to his 2016 presidential campaign. We've got full team coverage of the historic New York criminal trial. For more, let's bring in our executive editorial producer, John Santucci. Okay, and Olivia Rubin also, who has been covering this from the very beginning. And I'm told we've got other players that'll be coming into the mix as well, as we are learning now that things have just wrapped up. All right, so John, I'm assuming Trump will come out to the cameras and make remarks like he usually does.
Yeah, it's another day, and we better get used to it, Kira. It sounds like that's exactly what Donald Trump's about to do. The headline so far from our team that is down in that courtroom in Lower Manhattan: no jurors were seated as of close of business today. They only got through a couple, and what's most interesting, Kira, is that of the 96 jurors that originally walked into that courtroom to potentially join that member of that, be a member of that jury, instantly half of them left. They said that they could not be fair or impartial, getting that number cut in half, then cut in half again because of some timelines, some conflicts. One person saying they had their daughter's wedding, they couldn't be on the jury. So originally, that big number of 96, Kira, just getting down to 11. No jurors seated yet. A couple holdovers that they'll continue to question tomorrow. But I do think this does get to this idea of how long it's going to take for a jury to get seated. Look, it's obviously complicated to seat a jury of fair and impartial people regardless of the situation. But of this juror questionnaire, a lot of people reacting almost instantly: do you have an opinion of Donald Trump that would not allow you to be fair or impartial? And we saw half immediately removed. So they end today, they resume tomorrow. And really, Kira, you know, we have heard this timeline that it would take maybe about 2 weeks to sit a jury. Well, they didn't do much of it today because, as you well know, as we've been reporting here on ABC News Live, half the day was spent going through motions. They didn't even get into the jury selection process until well after lunch. We've got tomorrow. This court does not sit on Wednesdays. So really, you've only got 3 more days this week to maybe seat some jurors, and we'll see what happens.
So, Chris Timmons, let's talk about, can Trump even get a fair trial here? It's, you know, look, there's two sides to this. I mean, well-instructed juries, you know, they've shown time and time again, right, that they can put aside what they've learned, seen, been used to outside of a courtroom, and then come in and look at the evidence and give a fair shake here to whoever is taking the stand. But this is Donald Trump that we're talking about, who never leaves a headline.
Yeah, that's true, Kira. I mean, I think it's a difficult task. And as I said earlier today on ABC Live coverage, I mean, that's why they brought in 500 people this morning. I've never seen that. I've done some high-profile cases here in Georgia. I've dealt with opioid cases where people have a lot of opinions. I've done gang cases where people have a lot of opinions. And so you lose a lot of jurors, but, you know, not 500 brought in on the first day, and not of the 96 or however many were brought in the courtroom, losing 50 straight off the bat. That is unprecedented. Nevertheless, though, to get back to your question, can you get a fair jury? That's exactly why we're going through this process. And so while it may be a small percentage of the people that are brought in that can set aside whatever opinions they may have of the former president, either positive or negative, but we'll be able to find them and finally get down to the 18 people that we finally need to serve on this particular jury. Now, they've got to qualify at least, I think the number's around 40 or so that they've got to qualify to get down to that. Each side has 10 strikes. That's 20 jurors right there. And then for every 2 alternates, they've got an additional strike, which I guess would be 6 more strikes total. So you're looking at 26 people plus 16. The quick math on that is 42. And we've got to get to those 42 people before we can even get to then the peremptory strikes and get our jury.
So, Rachel Scott, let's bring you into the mix. You know, what's your take? Because polls are suggesting that a guilty verdict would likely have a big influence on what happens come November.
It certainly could, Kira. Look, there is no question. Republicans have rallied behind the former president. He has taken over the RNC. His daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is now serving as the co-chair, along with Michael Whatley, someone who has pushed Trump's false claims about the 2020 election. We have seen him break through that very crowded Republican field to become the presumptive Republican nominee. But things get tricky for the former president when you look at polls and you dig through some of those crosstabs, and you start to see that Trump supporters, about 13%, according to the latest Ipsos poll, would not support the former president if he were to be convicted of a crime. No, that's his own supporters. And then 24% of Republicans at large said that they would not vote for him if he were to be convicted of a crime. Now, that is a big red flag for the former president. And look, Donald Trump does not want to be in this courtroom. We are 6 months, 2 weeks out from Election Day. Who's counting? Not your campaign correspondent over here. He wants to be out on the campaign trail. He wants to be in these critical battleground states. He's now stuck in this courtroom for likely the next several weeks, and that's why we're going to probably see the former president come to the podium again and again to try to communicate his message, because this is really all he has at this point as he tries to juggle being in a courtroom and out on the campaign trail when he can, but he's going to be severely limited, Kira.
All right, John, what's developing?
Kira, our team is obviously still waiting as the court closes down for the day. And from our Aaron Katersky, it appears as they go through the scheduling phases of the next couple of days, Donald Trump has just indicated in court, his lawyers just indicated, that Donald Trump actually would like to attend the Supreme Court arguments next week on his efforts to delay his other trial. This is the Jack Smith special counsel case into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. As you know, Kira, Donald Trump's team has been trying to appeal that case in an effort to delay it. They delayed it up to the circuit court in D.C. The circuit court ruled with the district court the case could continue. Trump's team then appealed to the Supreme Court, saying that presidential immunity could be applicable in this case for Donald Trump's actions related to the team's efforts to overturn the election. And the Supreme Court took up the case. They decided to hear it, and those arguments, as of now, are slated to happen next Thursday in Washington, D.C. What's interesting about that, Kira, is that, we've talked about this collision course, right? The different hearings and cases that could happen at the same time. Next Thursday would be a normal business day for this trial, for what will probably still be jury selection here. But Trump now indicating he wants to go. We talk about the historic nature of this. I don't think we've ever seen a president, a former president, go before the Supreme Court for anything. So I just think that image, if that indeed happens, if Judge Merchan gives him the day off and lets him attend, we've had no indication previously that Trump wanted to go, but there it is from our team, Kira, just stated in open court. Donald Trump would like to go to the Supreme Court next week.
Yep, he just, he keeps creating, well, I don't know. What's I'm thinking? We expect it, but we don't. He's so unpredictable, but he is so predictable. Yep. It's just really. I mean, count all the firsts. And Olivia, you're there outside the courthouse. John's mentioning Judge Merchan. Let's talk about Juan Merchan. Who is he? What do we know about him? What's been the interaction like there in the courtroom? Is the former president being respectful? How is the judge handling the former president, who, as we know, can be quite the handful at times?
Well, I think, Kira, especially, with this team that's been covering Donald Trump in court for over a year now, we have really seen a development of Donald Trump in court. I remember nearly a year ago to this day when we saw Donald Trump being arraigned here for the first time, and how it was a vastly different Donald Trump that we see these days. I remember reporting at the time that he walked into a courtroom for the first time because New York was the first trial, and he seemed scared. He was timid. He said hardly anything, with the judge, Juan Merchan, asking him to please speak up because he couldn't hear him. And then you fast forward to something like the E. Jean Carroll trial, where Donald Trump is muttering under his breath. He is storming out of the courtroom. So we have seen Donald Trump develop in his demeanor inside of the courtroom, becoming much more feisty at times, much more aggressive at times. And I think Juan Merchan has been shown to be someone that is not going to put up with that sort of behavior. And when he read Donald Trump back some of his rights today, you have a right to be present, but if you are disruptive, I will throw you out of court. That is something something that he says to every single criminal defendant. He said, but it really carried a lot of weight when he said it to Donald Trump today. You could sort of tell that he meant it. You could tell that there was meaning behind it, because it is something we have seen from Donald Trump before. So it's going to be fascinating to see how these two face off, because remember, Donald Trump is not afraid to attack the judges overseeing his criminal cases. He is not afraid to attack the prosecutors, and he is not afraid to attack the family of Juan Merchan. And he has been going after his daughter, and now he is sitting in front of him in a courtroom today. So no real fireworks between the two today, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out over the next 6 weeks, because like I said, we have seen a Donald Trump that is much more emboldened 1 year into his courtroom journey than we saw when he was just beginning it.
Leave here for a half a day, go to D.C. and go before the United States Supreme Court because he thinks he's superior, I guess, to the Supreme Court. We got a real problem with this judge. We have a real problem with a lot of things having to do with this trial, including the DA, because you go right outside and people are being mugged and killed all day long, and he's sitting here all day with about 10 or 12 prosecutors over nothing. Over nothing. Over what people say shouldn't be a trial. So I just want to thank you very much, but that I can't go to my son's graduation, or that I can't go to the United States Supreme Court, that I'm not in Georgia or Florida or North Carolina campaigning like I should be. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want. This is about election interference. That's all it's about. Thank you very much.
John, I think we can be pretty direct here. This is not about election interference. This is about a story that goes back a number of years that involved his former fixer Michael Cohen and porn star Stormy Daniels, and the allegations of their relationship and payments that were made to keep her quiet. This is not election interference. Let's just lay out the evidence and the facts here that we've been covering for years.
Yeah, and Kira, I think that's the most important word you just said. We've been covering this for years. This is not something that began yesterday, not something that began after Donald Trump announced that he would go for the White House for a third time with this bid for 2024. This has been a case that many prosecutors have been looking into for some time, and actually, it's a case that began, believe it or not, Kira, I mean, going back to days when you and I were both in the same city working in D.C., it goes back to Special Counsel Robert Mueller and information he obtained from Michael Cohen that was then turned over to prosecutors in New York's Southern District. Michael Cohen ended up being prosecuted for some of those crimes, and then evidently it was turned over to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where they have been weighing what to do for some time, expanding the case, looking at different ways to go about it. Originally investigated by then District Attorney Cyrus Vance. He ultimately left office to not seek re-election. Alvin Bragg comes in, continues investigating, and here we are. That indictment, of course, coming down 1 year ago, just about this time last March. So definitely not election interference from there. Obviously, another claim Donald Trump made earlier today, not in that statement from what we heard, but saying that Joe Biden and others were behind all of this. As you well know, Kira, there is no evidence to say that President Biden is behind any of these investigations, any of these 4 criminal cases against Donald Trump. I do just want to note the 2 comments he made as he was coming out of court, Kira, if you'll let me. He commented about the Supreme Court case that I had mentioned to you a couple seconds ago, his team making that argument in court just before they dismissed today's proceedings, saying that he'd like to go next Thursday to court. Trump's team making the request, Judge Merchan denying it on the spot, saying that Donald Trump did not need to be at the Supreme Court. He needed to be in New York because these are criminal proceedings, and said he expects to see him next Thursday. Trump reacting, saying that he disagreed with the judge's opinion there. The other thing he talked about is that as they were going through the calendar for these proceedings, Kira, about days that would be on and off, Trump had asked at one point, his lawyers had asked on his behalf, to have off for his son Barron's high school graduation in May. That was also denied by Judge Merchan. Trump reacting to that, saying that the judge won't even let me go to my son's high school graduation. And again, I just think, Kira, where we need to explain the difference between what we've seen so far and where we are now. The other cases that Donald Trump had popped in and out of court for were civil proceedings. He did not need to be at those proceedings every day. Welcome to the new world order. This is criminal court. You have to be there as a defendant every day. Donald Trump now going to learn that the hard way.
And Olivia Rubin, I'm seeing your note here about the judge denying this request from Todd Blanche to excuse Trump from the proceedings. Anything else you want to add to that? I was just reading through the note that was just handed to me.
Well, I think to John's point, you know, he is not required to be there, and now he is not allowed to be there in what is going to be a very consequential hearing. And I think something about the immunity argument that a lot of people forget, because we're covering so many cases there, is it's actually bigger than just the January 6th case. Donald Trump has also filed a presidential immunity argument in Fulton County, Georgia, that is still pending. And I was just recently talking to a source down there who pointed out that in their view, that case is essentially paused, and the judge down there, Scott McAfee, likely is not moving forward with that case because the Supreme Court still has yet to decide. The source described it as limbo. So there is a lot hanging on the line for Donald Trump with that case, and it goes beyond just the January 6th case. So important to remember how intertwined all of these cases are. And again, he is not going to be able to be there because there is this case going on, and we have said it, but you can't stress it enough. It may be the only one to go forward. So it is the one that will, for now at least, command Donald Trump's attention for the next 6 weeks.
And Rachel, Biden is not saying anything, of course, about Donald Trump or anything that's been going on today or previously. What about members of Congress? What's the buzz up on the Hill? Anything?
Yeah, well, look, Republicans on Capitol Hill are largely standing by the former president. They have fallen in line. It's really hard to find any Republicans who will admit publicly that they have a lot of concerns about the accusations against the former president. But sources have told us privately they find this subject matter to be extremely difficult. They know that it's extremely problematic. And I would even go as far as to say that sources that I've talked to within Republican circles have told me they have concerns about the impact that this could have going forward if there is an actual conviction. And I think it's so striking here. We're talking about the notes that we are getting from our reporters, Aaron Kotursky, this line that he said the judge said inside that courtroom, your client is a criminal defendant in the New York County Supreme Court. He's required to be here. Kira, just how striking this is, because we were talking about the former president of the United States, the presumptive Republican nominee. This is a former president, when you're president of the United States, you don't really get told no. You're allowed to do what you want to do. You're the presumptive Republican nominee. You're allowed to travel where you want to travel. That is not the case. I think John really hit the nail on the head there when he said he is now faced with this very stark reality that is playing out in front of him. And this is a reality that the former president will have to contend with over the next several weeks. And it could be very irritating for him. We know that he walked into that courtroom today anxious, but also irritated, because again, every day that Donald Trump is spending inside of this courtroom is a day that he is not spending out on the campaign trail. And guess who will be out there? It will be President Biden, and he'll be making his case to the American people. And so even though President Biden isn't commenting on all of this playing out in the courts right now, he's looking to draw that contrast directly as he gets back out there on the campaign trail, Kira.
And Selena Wang, let's take it to you at the White House. You have Ty Cobb, who was an attorney for the White House under the Trump administration, was on set here with me. We were having the conversation that what happens if Trump indeed wins a second term and becomes president of the United States once again? Some of these cases can go bye-bye.
And look, Kira, right now, the White House is staying out of this. And in fact, when President Biden was asked just moments ago if he's even going to watch the Trump trial, he shook his head no. And the Biden campaign, too, they believe that this is a split screen that speaks for itself. To have the former president in the courtroom, they're on criminal charges over covering up this salacious scandal. They think that speaks for itself. They know this is going to dominate the news cycle, and they think that actually works in their favor, with Trump spending more time in the courtroom than on the campaign trail, as Rachel was saying. But look, if there is a conviction, the strategy that we're seeing from the Biden campaign, that could change, with some polls showing that a conviction could impact those critical independent and swing state voters. But for now, this week, the president, he's going to be out on the campaign trail. He's going to be traveling to Pennsylvania. He's going to be delivering an economic message about what they say is the president delivering for the American people versus Trump and the MAGA Republicans' campaign of revenge and retribution. So what we're seeing play out today, Trump in the courtroom, the Biden campaign believes it's just showing the American people what chaos could come with another Trump presidency. And for now, they think that's sticking with their message of showing the split screen, the contrast, the threat that Trump poses to women's reproductive freedoms to democracy. They believe that is a stronger message at this moment than focusing or fundraising off of his legal woes.
Brian Buckmeyer, from a legal perspective, I mean, Juan Merchan, the judge here, he's not giving the president any special treatment. He's being treated like anybody else that would come into his courtroom.
Absolutely. And I can tell our viewers and everyone else here, I've been a public defender here at the City of New York for the Legal Aid Society for about 8.5, 9 years, and I've had clients miss the birth of their children, miss graduations. I've had clients whose parents were in the hospital dying of cancer, and the judge says, you've got to show up to court. You're not going to get an excuse. And so I think what Donald Trump is getting a very real and harsh reality of, you're like everyone else. Everyone is equal under the law, whether you're a former president, whether you're an indigent client. This is the way that it works, and he is more than welcome to articulate his frustrations in any way to his base, to the people of America, but you are being treated the exact same way, regardless of your status or your money, when it comes to you have to come to court. You are accused of a crime, and as I argue, sometimes it shouldn't be, but part of the punishment is showing up each and every day.
Yep. Even if you're Donald Trump and you are used to getting your way, it's not going to happen in front of this judge for sure. We just saw that play out in Judge Juan Merchan's courtroom. Chris Timmons, the gag order, the social posts, what could happen here?
Yeah, so that's interesting, Kira, because the judge set a hearing for Wednesday. That's going to be their off day when they're not doing jury selection. That means they can do other court matters at that time, handle motions, et cetera, so that the jurors aren't hanging around like they were earlier today. But the contempt issue is really fascinating because I don't think there's much doubt that Donald Trump violated the gag order by talking about some of the witnesses on his social media platform over the weekend. The real question is, what's the judge going to do about it? I mean, we saw a different judge today where he indicated that he's putting his foot down. He's not going to treat Donald Trump any differently than he would a regular criminal defendant. And if that's the case, then there's got to be some punishment there. Then the two different types of punishment are either a fine or confinement, meaning he could put him into custody. If he puts him into custody, that could be interesting as well, particularly where he puts him, because in potentially could be Rikers Island, although that's highly, highly unlikely.
Oh, can you just imagine those pictures? Olivia, what about the timeline here? Are we on schedule?
Well, I think Judge Juan Merchan made sort of a loose reference to the fact that hypothetically they could be falling behind schedule. And I think we heard John Santucci hit on this already a bit earlier. They only got to actually question 11 jurors today. And some of those jurors gave answers that are probably going to get them struck either by Donald Trump's team or by the prosecutors. One of them saying, I think that no one is above the law, not even a janitor. That's not something Donald Trump's team is going to like. So it seems like we're going to be stretching far beyond the week or two that could have taken to seat this jury, just based on the fact that they only questioned 11 jurors in an entire day today, Kira. And Juan Merchan said that they had 500 ready to go to be questioned. So when you're talking about Donald Trump, who wants to get out on the campaign trail, who wants to go to a Supreme Court argument, who's going to be pushing up against the Republican National Convention this summer, every single day that they fall behind is going to be another day that they have to tack on to the end, another day that Donald Trump is in the courtroom, another day that he's not out on the campaign trail. So what they don't want is for this trial to stretch further and further and further. But based on the timing today, that's what it seems like is going to happen.
Chris, we got about 60 seconds left. Give me your final thoughts here as we wrap this up.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, just like Olivia talked about, the folks that are going to get struck, we're trying to qualify the panel. And Brian can speak to this, but I believe the magic number here is 42 qualified. So that's what we've got to figure out, is who are the 42 that are ultimately going to be the veneer. And then from there, they do their strikes.
Thank you all so much, Olivia, John, Rachel, Selena, Chris, Brian. You helped us get through the day. 6 hours Trump sat in that courtroom. We'll continue to follow, of course, the trial as jury selection wraps up and everything goes forward. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for streaming with us. More news ahead.